Good morning, everybody. Good afternoon and evening to those of you in the UK with Catherine. I'm so excited to have Catherine Edwards here on the channel today. I was on her channel last week. I shared that episode in the community tab, but if you missed it, I will place a link to it down in the description box below, along with Catherine's channel, so you guys can go and subscribe to her as well. Our fellow patriot from over in Mother England, especially where I'm from in the United States, we're all descendants from Mother England. So how are you today, Catherine?
I'm good. I'm good today, thank you. I must admit, for full transparency, today I had a bit of a wobble, and I'm sure we'll get on to talk about this because, whether it's the moon, whether it's hormones, whether it's just everything catching up, normally I'm such a positive person and I'm like, yeah, okay, I acknowledge something and then I go straight into, and what can I do about it? But today I've had a lot of stuff sent to me over the last 24 hours that I hadn't got around to listen to in this morning. And then I was like, I think the reality of where we're at took another big gut punch today. But I went out for a dog walk, went and saw my guinea pigs, and I'm back on track again.
Animals always make it better. They always just, we were, and, I know here in America, because America's obviously a lot bigger than England, but we have all these different states. And we've learned here in America over these past few years that your governor is really important. I don't think people really realize that. And of course, I'm in a state where it's not as severe as other states. We haven't had any mandates, none of this paperwork, none of that is happening here. And so it's been a little bit more relaxed than for people who are like in a more blue state or like California. They're living in a different kind of hell right now. But every time we get stressed out, we'll be out walking our dog. I just watch him. I'm like, he's happy, like regardless of what's going on. He's like, this is great. But yeah, and we said that before we started filming. I've been feeling very anxious this week and kind of panicky, and it's like you can kind of feel, I think most people watching understand this, that we are all connected. Your soul, your vibration goes out of your body. And so even the collective consciousness, we might even be picking up stress from the quote unquote bad guys as well, because, their time is running out, but it also feels like what's happening is this going to fall? You guys know what we're talking about. It's just very stressful because we don't have control. We don't have control over we don't have control of dates. We don't have control, we just do our part. And the only thing we have control over is ourselves. And that's it. But speaking of, I told Catherine before we got started filming, with this, timeline that we're shifting into, as we've been calling it, the Great Awakening, not the sad awakening, not the bad awakening, but the Great Awakening. For many people, including my boyfriend, they've been on this journey for like 20 years. And for some of them, I don't think they ever thought they would see the day where it would be globally, some of these things would be known. And I know for a lot of us, we started to kind of shift in our thought around the 2016, we'll just say, competition. And that's when things started shifting for Americans. But I'm always so fascinated by people who are not from America who figured it out, because as Americans, it's almost like we kind of had a cheat sheet, because it was so much it's like when you go and see a West End performance or a Broadway performance, the performance is happening on the stage. But in order for that performance to happen on the stage, there has to be sound guys, light guys, orchestra, costume designer, director, all this kind of stuff. And so I feel like America has been the stage, whereas other countries are also behind the scenes, and it's just as important for that stage, those performers, to perform. Does that make sense? And so it's like when I hear other people from like Jean-Claude and Janine and you and all of our friends that are Tamara down in Australia, who have like woken up, and Charlie Ward, and figured it out. I have so much respect for you guys, because you didn't have a cheat sheet. It wasn't your elections that kind of kicked this ball. When did you figure out that what was happening politically in America with Mr. T wasn't just about America? When did you figure that out?
Oh, long story. So I think my sort of realization about what was going on in the world has been really in stages. So going back a long, long way, sort of 25, 30 years, I've always seen a lot of, I'm a biologist, so I love biology. I love all aspects of natural health. So I studied as a biologist. Most of my friends are working in the pharmaceutical industry and public health, etc. And right from the word go, even when I was back 20 years old at university, I could see that a lot of what we were being taught is not borne out by reality. So what I meant by that is, at that stage, obviously I didn't have children of my own, but I was very into, my family have always had loads of animals. And I could see that what was happening with the way that we were being, the animal care and the veterinary medicine was going, and certain things there, I'll be very careful with my words, but about these and about chipping and passports and things, I could see it made no sense from a health point of view from the animal. And then when I became a mother myself, sort of 21 years ago now, and I started to see what they were recommending for babies, I was just like, this is just horrendous. And at that stage, a few of my friends and sisters had had children before me, and there was all the controversy about autism and reactions to certain baby ones of these. So I really looked into it at the time, and I was absolutely horrified by what I found. And not only horrified by what I found in the cover up and the fact that, no, I couldn't find virtually a single doctor or nurse that would actually have an open discussion with me about it, but also the fact that none of my friends or other, it was just a subject which was completely taboo, completely taboo. So at that stage, I began to be ostracized by quite a lot of people for being a nutter. So even people that I know whose children have had a really, really detrimental effect to these childhood ones, and that they were convinced that it had, say, given them autism, they still wouldn't question the system. Some would, obviously, that's a generalization. I'm talking about the ones in my circle. And so through there, I sort of got further and further apart from my scientific friends and started studying a lot more on the natural health side of things: herbs, essential oils, animals self-medicating, iridology, all, alkalizing your body, because I love learning. There's never been a day in my life when I don't go past in learning. So this was a gradual thing, and I was getting further and further away from it. I'm very much ridiculed by my friends who are still in science, even though they still wanted to come to me if there was something wrong with their children or their pets or something. So this dichotomy of like, you're not allowed to talk about this. And then when I started sticking up for people like Andrew Wakefield, who's been categorically proven to be right now, no one would even have the conversations. And then when I was pregnant with my daughter, it was when the big event that happened in America, in New York, happened. And I was to give birth to my daughter, and I can remember the day like everyone else can. And I was on a course with one of my best friends, Steve, and the course got stopped and we got called in to look at the news, and we saw this unfolding. Now, I'm not an engineer, but even I could see that what was on the television, I just knew that couldn't be the truth, but no one would discuss it. And I mean, literally, I didn't know anyone in any of my groups. I'm just like, of course it is, you've seen it with your own eyes.
So, but have you? But that's the thing, to have you? Is that a special effect?
Exactly. Have you? And I didn't know anything about special effects. I'm not a movie person at all. I watch very little television. I'm always outside doing something with the animals or something. So I spend very little time watching TV. So it's been a gradual event. And then in the 2016 elections, now I knew nothing about American politics at all, but it coincided, or UK politics, because I've never been interested in it. History and politics, I always got A's in history and full marks because I can memorize anything, but I never took any notice of it because I always knew it was made up. I knew that what we were being taught in the UK about, say, the First and Second World War, I knew that if I'd have gone and sat in a German class, I'd have taught a very different story. And it was so obvious to me. So yes, I could memorize at it, but I never showed any interest in it because I thought, this is just a story. I do not believe what we're being taught. And again, never allowed to question it. And then it comes 2016. So coinciding with what happened in America, we were also going through the Brexit thing in the UK. Now, I've never been interested in politics, again, because I've never trusted a single politician. I've written to them over the years about stopping badger culls and things like that, animal rights things. But I knew that they said one thing, and as soon as they got into power, they did something completely different. But with Brexit, I started thinking, hang on a minute, this is interesting. This is something quite significant. And there was a huge divide, and you could see the propaganda that we were being taught. So again, what they were reporting in the exit polls and what they were you were talking to people on street level didn't match, coincided with what was happening in America. I only had a bad opinion of Mr. T because all we got told in the UK was that he was a womanizer, a lech, you know, one of the rich brats, basically. He couldn't be. So I didn't know anything about him, but from the perception I had was not good at all. Yeah. From a woman's point of view, I thought, oh, what is Melinda doing with him? She's so gorgeous. But then I started showing, so things are building up in my system. Then obviously scandemic hits, and the moment it hit, I was just like, this is ridiculous from a biologist point of view. Theory of the V word, these things. And it was a very difficult time for me because unfortunately that stage is my father was in very advanced stage of cancer. So all this was hitting at a very stressful time when I could see, and his care just got dropped like that. It was absolutely barbaric. It was just hideous, same as loads of people have gone through. But I had to be very cautious what I was talking about because obviously family members all going through their own stress and everything with the situation. It was a very difficult time for everyone. But when it hit, immediately I could see through it. And I was just absolutely gobsmacked that everyone else couldn't. And with the work I've been doing for animals for so long, I think we spoke about this in our last chat, you know, my job, but I don't really feel it a job, my vocation is to see the world through an animal's point of view and to help us humans understand that. And I'm learning on that every single day from all the animals I interact with, and I still make mistakes and I learn from them. But when this hit, it was just gobsmacking to me about how everyone believed the narrative. And I'm thinking, well, if there's a real problem, you don't need the news to tell you there's a real problem.
Thank you. I cannot tell you, for the last 2 years, because we're outside a lot too, because we have these weird conversations, my boyfriend, and we've said that so many times. If this isn't actually an issue, you will see it.
Exactly.
You will see it.
And, you know, our family, classic example, my father's in the very late stages of cancer, very stressful time for the whole family. All my family have got loads of animals. We've got loads of things, you know, responsibilities on our plate that you can't just drop. Lovely responsibilities, but it's not things that you can just drop everything and go for, because animals need looking after regardless of what happens. And I was thinking, if there's ever a family that's going to succumb to something like this, it's going to be us, and we were all fine because everyone's immune system was down, everyone was stressed, no one was sleeping, sort of thing. Plus also from just a basic biology point of view, none of it made sense. None of the restrictions they were putting in place made sense. And I just basically was very shocked by the reaction of most people. Sort of were thinking, fantastic, I'm getting a paid holiday out of this.
Yeah.
And it just evolved from there, Brice. Then I never had any time off work. So I wasn't one of these people, because I work for myself and I just kept going throughout. Now it changed some of the stuff. So my business trips abroad stopped. But apart from that, my husband and I haven't had a single day off throughout it. So we weren't one of these people where we could stop everything and just listen and research it. But I put in the hours. I really put in the hours, because I thought, as a mum, as a daughter, as a, you know, whatever, there's nothing more important. This cannot wait, because I could see the direction that it was going in terms of this. And I'd done enough research over the last 24 years to realize that that couldn't be trusted.
Right.
And so I was literally burning the midnight oil, researching as much as I could. And I even though I love learning, I'm not, you know, I've never been into the alternative side of things, but I think, you know, because you could see through it so clearly, that's how I then really got into it. And then the more I started finding out, I know I've mentioned this so many times, it must be annoying to people, but, you know, Wayne Dyer says, when you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. And it was like bingo, 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 all the dominoes falling into place. And like, well, this explains this, this explains this, this explains this, this explains the schooling, this explains the education, the music, the acting, the pharmaceutical industry, the gun laws, absolutely, the finances, everything just fell into place. And actually, for me, it was a really lovely place to be in, because it showed that my intuition about all these things that I couldn't articulate, because I didn't know enough about politics, I didn't know enough about finance, but I knew there was something wrong. And now I was almost like, oh my God, this is why I've been feeling like this. This makes sense. But of course, then I was in a very difficult position, like all of us, when no one else around me felt the same thing. And I was very shocked by the backlash, actually.
Yeah. Yeah. I have a friend that works on the Jesus strand with me. She goes by Toronto. And I remember her saying once that when she started, she's a Canadian, obviously, Toronto. And when everything happened and she started figuring things out and researching, she was actually excited to show people, like, oh my God, this makes sense. She wasn't expecting them to completely reject just even looking at it. And it's sad, but it makes sense that we've gotten to this point in our society where people have been trained not to look.
Absolutely. And we're going to be having another discussion about this in another call, because this is what I've always been, one of the children that always annoyed everyone by saying, why? I never take anything at face value. So at school, I was the child that was moved to the back of the class for annoying the teacher. Now, I love school and I love learning. And I have a bit of a different view to a lot of people have said it's the most educated people that have been the most blindfolded by all this. But actually, we wouldn't have Dolores Cahill, Robert Young. We wouldn't have all these brilliant doctors, these brilliant lawyers, and these brilliant minds. You need both sides to look at it from different perspectives. So I think all of us have got a little bit of the jigsaw puzzle where, because of our personal passions, knowledge, life experiences, we understand some of it better than others. But actually, you do need all of them. But I've always loved learning. So for me, I was really excited thinking, oh my God, I'm really loving doing this. I'll share it with everyone. And just one by one, all my university friends, all my old friends that I used to work with, my family were the first ones, just shut you down, but with complete nasty ridicule, actually. And I'm sitting there a bit bemused by this, thinking, well, if like some of my family members are mechanics or their husbands are, and I'm like, well, I know nothing about cars. I really don't know. I'm not interested enough. I like my car. It's got purpose, but I've got no interest in working out how the engine works because I've got more other things I want to do. But I was saying to them, I said, look, if you came around and saw there was something dangerous with my car and you're a mechanic, I'm going to listen to you because I respect your opinion, because you know everything there is to know about cars and I don't. And I would hope if you saw something dangerous, you'd tell me. You wouldn't just let me drive off in the car. And yet I'm trying to explain something that I've done months and months and months and months of research in. You literally telling me I'm not allowed to mention it and you're banning me from all the groups. And yet I just don't, for my mind, just doesn't comprehend that. Now I'm starting to understand it more because I didn't realize just how deep the brainwashing was, and how I have seen through the work that I've done that people fight very hard for their limitations.
Yeah, it's that safety. It's and I know for me, especially, I've always been a bit of an alternative thinker anyway. I mean, I'm Aquarius, we kind of are able to detach a little bit and kind of and I've had a lot of spiritual experiences in my life. So I always knew that there was more to the world, but I was happy in my life and whatever. But there were certain things that I took at face value that we were taught. If you had told me 3 years ago that I would be questioning what the earth actually looks like, I would have told you were crazy. And I've said this on so many shows, I have no idea. At this point, I'm at that place where I don't know what we're standing on, because the more you go down that rabbit hole, the more you realize there's so much. And we're going to talk about this later this week as well. And we were saying this before I was saying this before we started filming, this group, and we can't say the name, but the dark people, they're evil, but I'll give them something. They're smart and they're patient.
Yeah.
And they have
that patience.
no, they have had the patience to, I was telling people last night, I did a deep dive into our Federal Reserve a long time ago. That was one of the first big rabbit holes I went down, because I think most Americans know to a small extent that wasn't necessarily, I have to be careful what I say, but kosher. We'll just sort of, as to what our Constitution says, but it happened. And so when you start doing the deep dive into it and how wild that was and how much of that institution controls so much. And here in the United States, that institution at the beginning of the 20th century not only became a money scheme, but also started to control our educational system here in America. And before that, we didn't have, in America, we call them public schools. I know in England, their public schools are private schools for us, but free education. And majority of people here in America do go to a public school. It's in it. And on the outside, that looks like a great idea. We're going to make sure that all of the American citizens can at least read and write and have some basis of education that's going to make our country stronger. Well, what I started to realize is that before they institutionalized that, kids, even here in America, were learning Coptic Egyptian, Latin, Sanskrit, and now kids can't even speak their own mother language well.
Yeah.
It's unbelievable. I mean, we were taught growing up. I did go to a private school, but even with private schools, your parents paid to send you to them, they still have to follow the state or the federal government. Yes. So you're not even free of that indoctrination. The only thing that private schools ensure a lot of kids is that they're going to get accepted into top universities, which that's just kind of, and especially, a lot of for us, and I know I always say down here in the deep South, we very much mirror a lot of the English culture because a lot of our ancestors were from England, and you can see that all over the United States where different pockets of Europeans settled. But for like private schools and boarding school situations, it's also a lineage thing. It's like a parent goes there, their kids go there. And so it's a cultural thing as well. But when I was a kid, we learned how to read and write in cursive. Kids aren't taught that anymore here. So they're taking away the ability for people, like I was saying, I love going through these missing books of the Bible because there's just so much information there. But if you were to hand me the keys to the Vatican Library and tell me I can go in and read from whatever I want, I would just give you the keys back because I can't read Coptic Egyptian. I can't read Aramaic. I can't read Hebrew. No one ever taught me that. But kids little over 100 years ago were learning that stuff. We've been robbed of that. So we are this one centralized way of thinking and looking at things versus having an array of different perspectives and information coming in that can really grow a society. And it's the deeper you go into that rabbit hole, it's like, oh my gosh. They were patient. They planned this. And, psychopaths are intelligent. I mean, they are.
So. I mean, you've only got to look at something like chemotherapy and realize just how brilliant the brainwashing's got. And so, you can take something that is literally mustard gas and convince people it's going to make them better. Now, I know there'll be loads of people that will have different opinions on that. So everyone is entitled to their own opinion. But what they've done is they've made us feel unsafe to make decisions for ourselves and to be reliant. So they've taken away. So in the UK, we have the National Health Service. So we're very lucky in terms of access to health, but you're very restricted. There's no alternative care available for that at all. And in fact, it's completely shunned.
Yeah.
So it's really, really interesting when you look at it in terms of, you can now see back in terms of how well planned this has been done, controlling the medical schools, controlling the veterinary schools, controlling the education system. I mean, I've got loads of friends who are teachers and brilliant teachers, and they just pull their hair out now because most of their job is administration. They've got no leeway to be a good teacher. I mean, most of us of my generation, we can always remember there was always one teacher that really inspired passion in you. And when I was a child, when I was very young, about 4 or 5, I can remember being taken on nature walks as part of the school, and we were taught which berries you could eat and which you couldn't. And the thing nowadays, you can't do any of that because health and safety, they can't go near anything that they might be able to eat or touch, or, it's just ridiculous. Political correctness gone mad.
Yeah.
But I just keep my words for this year has just been, oh my God, it's fascinating. It's fascinating to see. I've always been very different. Even as a child, I was always really different, completely different to my 2 sisters, very different to most of my peer group at school and everything. And now I can see why. And I find I'm a twin as well. And I find that really interesting to see we're not identical, but, in terms of what we've been exposed to throughout our childhood really, really similar, and yet we couldn't be more different.
Yeah.
And what I am really finding interesting now is to say, why is it that some of us think we can see the truth? If what we think is through the truth, is it the truth? You know, are we in a different matrix? That's
Yeah.
another conversation again, particularly in terms of perhaps the lack of direction of where things seem to be going at the moment. And why do a lot of people have this desire to not question anything? Why is it too stressful to them to question it? Because it is, you can see
Yeah.
it really is very stressful for them. To any questioning of the narrative scares the shit out of them.
Yeah. I there was this guy I like briefly dated many years ago before I met Todd, and he was very well educated. He had a lot of degrees, and he was also in the yoga world. But something that drove me crazy about him, he would bash people who, liked their labels, like their designer clothes, but yet he was doing the same thing with how educated he was. Like nobody else's opinion mattered to him because he had all these degrees. Like, because I didn't have my master's, my opinion wasn't as valid as his. And
Yeah.
so I think for me, it's like, and that became very interesting because I was like, you bash people, but it's as human nature, what we hate the most about someone else is usually what's our shadow side anyway. And you can see it's the same thing. He was doing the exact same thing as, being kind of vapid, as he called it, and liking the designer clothes and showing that off. But he was doing the exact same thing with how many degrees he had. And so I think what's happened, and I think human beings, the human condition, we always want to validate ourselves. Since the beginning of time, we always want to feel like, our ego and our pride, that we have purpose. And I think for some people, they are been so focused on their external validation of who they appear to be in the world that they've done zero work on their inner world.
Yeah.
Because if you have peace within yourself and your own sense of self, then the world can be falling apart around you, and you feel stressed by that, but you still can hold on to that inner peace of sense of self that you can, as my boyfriend says, you can settle back into it. And so I think there are a lot of people, and I know in the Western world, because I think at the end of the day, I think all the countries that are considered Western countries have a lot of similarities in the fact that, and this is what they've done this too, the fact that it's always keeping up with the Joneses. They have upped the ante so much. I mean, here in the United States, when I graduated from high school in 2001, so I'm 38 now, and even at that point, it was stressful to try to get into a good university. With the SATs and the ACTs, and you have to take them all, 4-hour tests, and you would take them multiple times to get this highest score. And then that wasn't all. You had to show your what you did in school, your academics. Then you had to show what you did for your extracurricular, your sports, your community service. So it was like for a 14, 15, 16, 17, 18-year-old, it was like working 2 full-time jobs just to be able to get accepted into a good university. Well, nowadays, or at least I don't know what it's like because of all the situation with, the Zoom school and stuff, but at least a few years ago, teenagers in high school and the upper schools were going through even more stress to be able, the ante had been upped even more to get into these universities. And the price of education here in America has just, it's like this catch-22. I mean, it's unbelievable. People will go to universities, and even if you, heaven forbid, you go to med school or law school, you're looking at paying those loans back for the rest of your life. And if you don't pay them all back before you leave the earth plane, I love all Janine's terms, leave the earth plane. Your children then have to take up that debt. They have to then be responsible for that. And so you're getting in this cycle. And it's interesting. You talked about the NHS, like we have our medical here is all privatized. Well, it's like they've taken 2 extremes with this, because even though we have more of a sense of choice because we pay for everything, they've made it so expensive that most people can't pay for everything. They can't.
Yeah, it's the same over here. I mean, the cost of any alternative healthcare is just so astronomical. It's out of most people's, budget completely. But yeah, this keeping up the Joneses is a really important thing, I think, for people to discuss, because I think this is you know, people are, their general level of stress, just, you know, most, if you've got a family, both parents have to work just to be able to afford the cost of living. And then it's a very stressful situation on the children as well, because as you say, they've got to achieve and sort of perform, and there's a big gap between the haves and the haves not, definitely. You know, sport, if you want to do well in sport now, you can't get that through the school system like you could when, you know, when I was at school.
Yeah, same.
You have to do it with your parents after school and everything. So most children get very, very little time off. And most parents don't get any time off. So there's actually not a lot of time for people to do this extra research and think about it, because they're so busy just keeping up with the day-to-day bills and the day-to-day schedule. It's really, really hard for a lot of people. And I do get that. But at some stage, you also have to, you know, take responsibility for yourself and say, am I happy? And if not, only I'm the one that can change this. So I changed my life completely, having had I've had loads of different careers in my life, loads of different careers, because I have a low boredom threshold. And when I left my really, you know, good job to go and be an equine iridologist, I was just literally laughed by all my counterparts for saying, don't be so ridiculous, that's not even a job, you know, it's not on any job description list. But I made a really good success out of it because I was passionate about it. And I've changed careers so many times, but then not everyone has got the personality to do that. So I just find it so interesting looking and thinking where we're at today. You know, the division here, I spoke to Janine about it last week, it seems to have ramped up another huge step here in the UK again, following on very closely from Australia and other countries, in terms of the fact that the division between the people that are towing the line and their scorn of people that aren't, and vice versa, is now so big. I do wonder what's going to happen next and how it can be rectified, because I've got people I was speaking to this weekend whose family have now said they cannot see them because they're not this and they're a danger.
I mean, I'm grateful my family is not that way. Yeah, my you know, we have Thanksgiving coming up here in the United States, and I know that that there's some interesting stuff behind Thanksgiving and whether or not it was, if it's dark or good. But for, you know, I've always kind of said this with these holidays that we have, that if your intention is good, it's
yes.
good, you know. And I've always loved Thanksgiving because it was a time, there was no expectation of giving presents. It was always just family getting together, having a nice meal. I got to see my mom's parents passed away when she was in her early 30s, so we grew up really close, my mom's sisters and their kids, so my cousins are like my siblings. And you know, as we've gotten older and married and more kids are coming, it was just this awesome holiday where you didn't have the pressure of Christmas. It was just being together. And I feel so grateful that my family is not one of these families that's like, well, you can't come. My parents don't have that either. Because I know there are people that are getting kind of their door shut in their face by their family that's supposed to love them unconditionally. I can't imagine that. I've heard stories of like friends whose parents have shut the door in their own children's face.
And this is really happening, and it's happening because they are in a fear state. You know, they genuinely have somehow, the brainwashing has been so effective that they believe it, and they literally do think we are nutters, you know.
I know. It's I have my grandmother, my last remaining grandparent, my dad's mom. She actually passed away on Saturday, this past Saturday, the 23rd, and she had been dealing with dementia for a very long time. And for anybody who's known anybody to pass away of this, you know, when she first was diagnosed, it was okay. She still could, but it gets worse and worse. And at the end of their life, it's you're kind of relieved when they do pass, because it's horrific, because they can't, you know, she was having temper tantrums and just losing it because she couldn't remember things. And of course, this past couple of years, she's been in an assisted living home, so we haven't been able to really go visit. My sister will bring her kids to see her, but they'll have to stand outside of a window to see her, and she doesn't understand why she can't see her great grand. You know, it's been very stressful. But anyway, on the 23rd, this past Saturday when she passed away, that was her wedding anniversary with my grandfather. Now my grandfather passed away a couple years ago, and the whole day that morning she kept telling all the staff, I'm gonna go see Ed today. I get to go see Ed today, my grandfather. And of course she did see him because she passed away on the wedding. It was beautiful. But we've been trying to figure out the funeral, the burial, all that kind of stuff. And it is like, there's some members of my dad's side of the family that are completely just on the other side of this, and just trying to figure out a time for us to go outside to a graveyard, just taking the church off the table, just do it in a graveyard, is becoming so freaking stressful. And it's like, oh my God, you can't even break through your fog and your derangement for 5 minutes just to be able to put together a ceremony for all of the grandchildren, the great grandchildren, to get together and have this burial and then move on. It's unbelievable to me. It's unbelievable. And I know that the military back channel, that we can't say because if we did, we would be gone, talked about a specific weekend coming up, the S weekend. I'm not going to say the name of the works. We can't say it on YouTube either, but where people decide to take themselves off the earth plane themselves, if y'all know what we're talking about. And my boyfriend and I have been talking about that a lot, because a lot of these dark players, we know that some of them are already gone, like what you're seeing is body doubles. So who are they speaking about? Who is this? Who is the military back channel speaking about? One of my friends thought it might be the fundamentalist when they realized that their religion is not correct. But Todd thinks it might be some of these deranged people that just all of a sudden, that the pride that they've been on their high horses for all this time, shaming other people, only to realize that they were following a very, I'll use Janine's word too, because I love it, dastardly plan. I feel like we need a dictionary just of all of Janine's
That's
words.
what I was saying, actually. It's like, we're never going to talk in the same way again. We're so used to doing sign languages and using all these different words. We're not going to return back. And then when you go on one of the ones when we're on the uncensored platform, it's so funny because it's just such a relief, isn't it, that you can actually say what you really want to say.
Absolutely. I know I was in my mom's kitchen the other day, and I started doing, this, and my mom was like, what? I was like,
what are you doing? Yeah, what are you doing, you man, woman? Yeah.
No, sorry, I can say the word in your kitchen. Nobody's listening yet. I know I've been very stubborn. I need to get a new phone. If you have the iPhone, every few years you got to get a new one. But I've been very stubborn because they put that new system in your phones. Y'all know what I'm talking about. I know that they can find us anyway. But I've been so stubborn just to reject that. But I mean, what do you think about that? When everything comes out, when we finally hit the precipice of this awakening, how do you think some of these people, and I know there are going to be things that we're even shocked about. I know that even
definitely. I think there's going to be a lot of things that all sides are shocked about. And I think that's the best thing, really, because somehow we've got to get past this embarrassment of being wrong.
Right.
Whether you call it the ego, whatever you want to call it. But most people find that very, very difficult to get past. But we're never going to move on if we don't. And I'm not one that I personally don't believe that they're waiting for a certain number of people to wake up to do things. That just makes no sense to me at all, because very clearly both sides have been in manipulating things, what we see, what we do, and what their tactics are. And so they should, because it would be ridiculous if we all knew what was going on.
Right.
But I don't believe they're waiting for that, because if they are, it's definitely going in the wrong direction as far as I'm concerned. Now, I know every country is different, and I know there's pockets of some people that are saying absolutely everyone's asking questions, but there's equally huge pockets of people that have just had enough and are just going to comply because it's too long, too difficult, too draining for them. And they just don't want to know. So I think there's going to be huge implications of it. But I think on both sides, I think there's going to be a lot that we all find out that is going to shock us. And I think this is why that being attached to nothing is really, really so important, and something personally I've been working on an awful lot. Because you do go through roller coasters. It's hideous being a mother, seeing what my children are having to go through and the opportunities they're having to forfeit because of this decision, and also seeing the pressure that's put on them. It's horrendous. Doesn't really matter to me because I'm quite self-contained in what I can do, and I've got quite a few different strings to my bow that I can adapt to different circumstances. But for a lot of people, and my son's still at university and things, it's just really, really hard to, every week gets harder to sort of say no to certain things. So I think there's going to be a huge issue, but I just think you get to a stage where you just got to get on with it. And I suppose, if I'm being honest, what's really hit home to me this week is why they're not getting on with it. You know, we're seeing manipulation of things like the volcano in that thing. Now, there's loads of things going through about the manipulation, and in one respect, once you shine light on it, they can't get away with certain things anymore. But
Right.
we found out about it on YouTube. You can sure as hell that the people who were fighting the battle knew about it a long time ago. So we need some disclosure.
I absolutely agree with you. And that's why I think we spoke about this. I know I was laughing with JC about the whole winning thing. Like, are we winning for the cuckoo's nest? And you know, and as Todd said, my boyfriend a few weeks ago, like, we just need a win.
We do.
Peace, just one win. And I'm not one of those truthers, if you want, that wants to cling to dates either. Cause I've always said, like, if we can figure out the dates, so can they. Like, come on, you know, and I know that and I always think, okay, maybe they're just trying to make sure the least people are going to, like, be collateral damage in a switcheroo. But then on the other side of it, we've been told that all these dangerous people are no longer here. So it's like, that's confusing. And it's like, you know, and as my boyfriend was saying, the most frustrating thing is we have put up with so much abuse from the other side.
Yeah.
And if they're still worried about the other side's feelings, that's not cool, because look what we've put up with for years now. Like, literal, I mean, when people knew that who we were supporting, we had friends, like good friends, do smear campaigns on us on social media just because we were supporting Mr. T. And in the 2016 competition, we were actually in India. Both Todd and I were in India when that happened. And neither one of us, I was so confused, because both of them, you know, the media was saying one thing about this person over here, but then this lady over here, I mean, I don't know anybody who trusts her, you know. Y'all know who we're talking about, Miss H over here, HC. And so it was very confusing. And it was like the first time in my life that I had never participated in the competition. I just was like, you know what? I'm going to go to India, and whatever is meant to be will be. And then after it happened and he won, I remember sitting in a cafe with Todd in India, and they had a TV up showing it. And I had been kind of brainwashed as well by all the propaganda, everything they were saying. But I remember sitting there kind of watching it, and I was like, well, this is interesting. And I remember kind of feeling a bit of a relief, like, at least it wasn't her. And at least, like, you know, and I was like, well, maybe it'll be okay, because he's not a politician. And maybe it'll be okay. But then all of a sudden, my boyfriend had been following the person who was before the military back channel. I'm sorry, guys, I have to speak in code. There was a person that was posting on these back channels before the military thing took over. And so he had already been following some of this stuff before that fateful day when the other thing dropped, and was giving us, y'all, I hope you all know what I'm talking about, the 16 plus 1 or 18 minus 1, a letter of the alphabet, that was giving us this intel. And all of a sudden it was like, oh my God. And this person, this is why he's being completely slaughtered right now, is because he's going up against one of the biggest machines in the whole world, the literal beast, you know, and he's not perfect. No one is. But at this point, I think we miss the fact that he, in America at least, that he stood up and told the truth.
This is the thing. And my mother picked that up right from the start. Before I knew anything about him, she was like, well, you know, at least he's honest about what he's doing. You know, he's really honest. And that means everything, because you shouldn't be perfect. And sometimes it's like, you know, I've worked for telecoms companies, I've worked for the National Health, I've worked for all sorts of different companies. And if I hadn't have worked for them, I wouldn't have known most of what I know now, which is really useful to me in terms of what the real truth of the situation is. So I think you have to get inside these things somehow. And sometimes you have to get in there. And then when you get in there, you realize, oh my God, this is going on. And now it's what you do at that stage that counts. Do you stay and comply with it, or do you go? And I think that is the key that people are missing. The point is that you can't know all this corruption's going on if you don't witness it for yourself, because what we have learned is you cannot believe what you see. And it's really, really interesting. Again, I mean, most people know about, if we take, say, the Catholic Church, you know, most people know that there's been a lot of abuse within that organization. Now, of course, no one's realized how widespread it is, but that's been talked about for years. I mean, it's
not shocking anymore.
It's not shocking anymore. The extent would be shocking. But of course,
or how deep they go is going to be shocking when they actually eat. That's going to be shocking for people, but the actual them being shady in the way they handle children is not shocking anymore. I mean, it's the same in the Protestant churches too, but the dark side, I mean, I can honestly say this will probably lose most of the audience, but with what I've been through and seen over the last year, I really have at times, and still do, question whether a lot of the human race is a positive influence on the planet. Because you do not see this happen in any other animal on the planet, where they let themselves, there's self-regulating mechanisms. Now, I'm not talking about, do I believe the planet's overpopulated? No. Do I believe there's loads of areas of the planet we haven't been told about? Yes. Do I believe that, that a lot of the problems, I mean, the consumerism now is obscene, absolutely obscene. When I grew up, you got one present for Christmas, one present for your birthday, and you were very grateful for that. Now, this plastic rubbish we chuck at everything, the fact that you have to upgrade your computer every couple of years, your phone every couple of years, it's disgusting. But so, yes, I think human behavior has to change to not pollute the things, but I do not believe we're overpopulated. I think it's badly managed. But when I look at the way as a race we behave, I'm pretty ashamed to be a human. Is my honest opinion. Have you ever read The Law of One?
No.
Series. What you're saying, that's kind of the philosophy that my boyfriend follows, and I've only read bits of the first book, but what I know I've learned from him, and it's not a religion, it's like a philosophy of what's going on, and it can be married into any type of faith, but that basically in like the late 70s, early 80s, this woman like channeled this like six density being. It was a group of beings, and they called themselves Ra. This is different from the Ra of the Egyptians. They were a group of people, and they were explaining to her how this all works, and that we as beings have to decide whether we want to follow we're polarized. We live in a world of polarity. We have to decide if we want to follow the polarization of light, or the polarization of darkness, or the polarization of service to others, or polarization of service to self. Now, the planet Earth is, according to the Law of One, is what they call third density. And it is destined to go into fourth density positive. Now, third density, our bodies are third density bodies. Now, the Bible talks about the light bodies, that our bodies are going to change once we move up into the planet. We could say we're third dimensional into fifth dimensional, but the density of our matter, of our nature. Well, the Law of One says that in third density planets, you have to go through a third density cycle for thousands and thousands and thousands of years, as in Earth time. When your soul is in the soul, time is different. And then you get to a point where you can harvest. I know that sounds like a horror movie, but you either harvest positive or negative. You make that choice. And people aren't going to like me saying this, but the Law of One says both negative and positive, both are legitimate spiritual paths. And that is why you see, like, you can call that God and Lucifer, that they both have eventually the negative has to falter back into positive because it can't go any further. I know that sounds, trust me, guys, just read it for yourself. But a lot of what it was saying and teaching us actually makes sense to what we're experiencing now. But according to the Law of One, planet Earth, or whatever it is we're standing on right now, as I said earlier, whatever this
who knows?
Who knows at this point? A helium balloon we're on? I don't know. It is one of the most toxic and hardest third density planets to be on. It is other third density planets are a lot easier than planet Earth. So if you chose to come to this planet to do the work, because it's all about your own work, you basically picked like the Ivy League of all third density planets. Now, basically what Ross says as well. So in order for you to polarize positive, 51% of your actions have to be in line of empathy and compassion to others, whether that's animals, whether that's humans. They do have laws of forgiveness. I know that I know I'm a vegetarian and we talked about this last time, but for us, for both Catherine and I, we come from cultures where people eat meat.
Yeah.
And so for people who haven't found that within themselves to go vegetarian, there is a law of forgiveness because culturally that is where your third density body was born into, stuff like that. Whereas someone who's born into a vegetarian society like India, where it's 80%, they might not have that law of forgiveness. It's just different for different cult, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So so you don't have to be perfect. You can have times of selfishness and be an asshole sometimes.
That's a really important point, because we can't all be perfect.
No.
And you know, we all know that the best way we learn is through our mistakes, but what you do is you hope you learn from your mistakes, and if you don't learn from them, then I've got
a problem. No. Well, that's when someone has empathy, they will learn from their mistakes. They'll feel the impact of the consequences of, and it's only 51% of you has to have made these right decisions. Well, in order to polarize negative to service to self, you have to have 99% of you has to be diabolical.
Yeah.
So you look at the people that are in this, we'll just call this, I know Janine calls it dark cult, this religion, and the things that they do in their ceremonies, that's diabolical. And so it is a literal, but then people who are in the gray, who haven't made a decision yet, they just live in the gray. And so when their life is over, if they haven't made a decision, they'll have to go back to third density and keep doing third density until, if that makes sense. And then I was telling Jean-Claude this, that what's so fascinating about Earth at this time, according to the law of one, is that this is the first time, or one of the rarest times, where we as the inhabitants of this planet are going to actually get to experience the planet itself. So it's not just us that are harvesting, it's the planet too. We're going to be on the planet as it transfers to fourth density. And that's why a lot of people, like, I know for me, Jean-Claude and I had that in common, where we both kind of had this, we needed to exercise more.
Yes. I've been thinking to him about that right from the start. Yeah.
It's like, you got to prepare yourself for something major that's about to happen to you. And so that's very interesting. And it kind of mirrors what like Revelation says in the Bible as well, that we will be here and experience this transfer of the earth, because the earth itself is a living being. And so the animals too will be coming with us. Now, animals, though, according to the law of one, are second density, even though they can come into the fourth density, because animals are a lot, my dog's down here, that's why I keep pointing down here, they're a lot better than we are as humans, in my opinion. They're way more worthy. But the second density beings, like my dog Ravi here, in order for them to then get, when the day comes that he passes away, which I told him he's going to be getting in the med beds too, because he's not leaving. He'll leave with us. But when the day comes that they pass away, if they had been loved unconditionally by a third density being, then that next life they will come back into third density as well, which is kind of magical. Because you think about your pets, I hate you use the word pets, animal family members that you've just loved so much in your life, and that love gives back to them as well. And so that their soul is able to then leap up into a higher density body too. So it's quite magical in that way. And we just keep going. And the thing about the fourth density polarity positive planet is that the fourth density negative beings cannot be on it. So when they say that these people have to go, like literally they have to go. Their vibration won't work on that planet. So it's just interesting. And there are things about the law of one that I don't agree with. But there are things that are very interesting. And we were I don't know if we were saying this before we started filming, or while we were filming, that we've gotten to this place in our society that bothers me a lot, where people can't. It's like they think it's moralistically wrong to just look at the other side.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And Aristotle said it's a sign of an intelligent mind when you can entertain an idea without accepting it.
And you need to, because it's never a black or white solution normally, is it? I mean, very rarely. I'm sure people can think of some examples, but that in generally speaking, we narrow our options off so much. So I have it said to me the whole time, well, I can't do this because of that. And I'm like, but you're thinking it's either A or B, but there's a million other options we haven't even discussed yet that you could look into. but I can see why they feel like that, because that's the way we've been taught.
Mhm.
You know, it's this or that, it's this or that. And it's like, you know, when this whole issue came out here, and we're like, we are the test subjects, because normally we test on animals. It's like,
Right.
why on earth do we think it's all right
Right.
to test these things on animals? There's a thing that's doing the rounds this week, which is just too foul to even look at. But there's a thing about Mr. F.
Yes, I was about to say.
With the dog experiments. Now
I
I won't
can't look at that stuff either.
anyway, it's disgusting. But the whole point is they're all saying Mr. F. Well, for that to have even happened involves a huge team of people and company decisions. So there's so many people that are complicit in letting that level of absolute revolting cruelty. Now, a lot of those people who are doing those jobs, or even managing directors of the company, or providing the equipment, I mean, there's so many people on so many different levels. And I'm sorry if you don't know what we're talking about, but it's talking about a really extreme, horrendous form of animal experimentation. I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah.
And yet, how many people are complicit? How many people have said, well, they haven't even tested it on animals yet? Well, how do you think they do these animal tests?
Right.
How do you think they test the makeup? So at some stage, we have to start having that awakening when we think, oh my God, I wonder how.
Yeah.
And at what stage, rather than just sharing something on social media, what are you going to do about it? Are you going to make different buying decisions? Are you going to write to the company and just put an objection? Are you, you know, what are you going to do about it? Are you going to not watch your favorite TV program, miss going to the gym, and actually put some time or whatever it might be for you, put some time aside and say, this is a priority and I will not let that pass?
Yeah, you're right. And back, I mean, that to experiment for if you're looking at makeup or something,
Yeah,
to experiment on an animal to see if it's safe is a path of service to self.
absolutely.
That is absolutely the most selfish thing. And I always check the labels on products. I know here in America they have a label that will assure you, which how much can you trust at anything anyway? But it's the best that we can do, and we do our job is to make sure we're buying products that are not, that have passed the label of not being. And it's like a have you met Shanti from Aquarius Rising Africa?
I haven't met her. I've watched her stuff, but I
I
haven't
should
met
introduce
her.
you to, because she
Right,
is
brilliant.
she's amazing. She lives down in Africa, and we've talked about, you know, the wild animals versus domesticated, all that kind of stuff. And we were talking about like slaughterhouses.
Yeah,
There's a reason why they keep slaughterhouses away from populated areas.
exactly.
They don't want, and I remember, you know, people keep asking, and I've been a vegetarian for most of my life. Now, when I was a little kid, meat would make my stomach hurt. That's why I really kind of stopped eating meat, was more like my stomach. And I didn't, at that point, you're so young, you don't put the two and two together that the steak is the cow. It's just not. But I remember my mom's family is from the coast of South Carolina, the Charleston area, low country. And there's a very famous dish down there. It's called she crab soup. So it's the female meat of the crab in this creamy based soup. And I remember I was probably 5 or 6 years old. We would spend our summer times down in the low country off the coast there. And I remember being in a restaurant, and my parents, we always got she crab soup as an appetizer. And I remember the waitress putting down the bowl in front of me, but they had not, I guess for display purposes, or the, you know, how they present the meal, they had not mushed up the meat within the soup. Normally, if you see the soup, it's just like a white grain, almost like clam chowder. You had to mash it up yourself. And I remember seeing the outline of this crab's body in my soup and just screaming, crying. Just as a little kid, just all of a sudden, it just horrified me that this crab was in my bowl and wasn't alive anymore. And that's from the mouth of babes. That's from a child. And I remember like reaching for my mom and just having just this heaving, crying in the middle of the restaurant because the crab was in my soup. And my dad tried to mush it up for me to show me, and I wouldn't touch it. You know, I remember being that young. I mean, that the first time that understanding really hit me, that this was a living being that was being presented to me for me to eat.
Yeah.
You know, and so I agree with Shanti. There's a reason why they keep the houses away. I mean, down here in the South, Atlanta's a big metropolitan city, but we're surrounded by farmland. And anytime we go see my parents or go to Florida to see Todd's, we're in Georgia's all small towns and farmland besides Atlanta. And we'll pass big trucks with like chickens in cages.
Yeah.
And even as a 38-year-old woman, it makes me so emotional to see
Yeah,
that, like so emotional. Because and you know that those animals are not, they're not even like they're so fat they can't even stand up. They've
exactly,
it's disgusting.
exactly. There's a
It's
huge difference between, you know, someone who needs meat to survive and killing an animal in, you know, they're grazing, they don't know anything about it, they're a really good shot, gone, to loading them up into a slaughterhouses. But I think the animal experimentation is incredible. And what gets me is it's the outrage when we find out that these things are being done to humans, and the general level of acceptance that it's okay to do it to an animal. And yet, you know, the UK, we are a nation largely of animal lovers. We're quite well known as to being very eccentric over our animals. Of course, there's animal cruelty that goes on here a lot, most of it unintentional, actually, through ignorance rather than, but we are, and it's just this sort of out of sight, out of mind. And I think, you know, this can only go on for so long. You cannot survive as a species in nature with that level of selfishness, or whatever you might want to call it. So you see everything that's happening now, and it's awful. And you know, for a lot of people, it's just having devastating consequences. As I said, for me, I just feel sorry for my children in terms of what's happening. But I also feel excited, because did I actually want them to grow up with this continuing? And no, because you know, what sort of world is that to grow up in? You know, where are you going to look back on your deathbed and feel satisfied with the choices that you made and what you participated in? So, but I still want something. White
I
House,
know that would be, I mean, I keep every year, because I remember
something.
the military back channel
Yeah,
1891 told us once, you're going to have a Merry Christmas. And every Christmas we get to that, and we're like,
yeah.
and now we're like, is you know, they're saying, they're giving the date of November 2nd. And
My birthday.
oh, happy birthday.
I'm not going to tell you how old I am. I'm going backwards now. Yeah.
Well, with that's, you know, that's an interesting
Yeah.
thing I've proposed. So when we first, in March 2020, when everything was, you know, we were getting word that medical centers, hospitals here, like half of them weren't in use. They shut it off. And my thought, I said, were they installing med beds? Like, is that,
Exactly.
are we going to have them available very, very soon? And it's going to, because, you know, you look at even the old scripture, the Bible, and this old scripture, people lived a long time back then. They lived
Yeah.
a very long time. Our life cycle is so short. But I know with kids, I'm fortunate at this stage that I don't have a child, but my sister has 3 children. My nephew's birthday is actually tomorrow. He'll be 9 years old. But I see the stress in her eyes. It's a different kind of stress when you have children. So I totally get that than when you don't, because she's worried about her children. You know, I understand where you sit, because it's your babies, and she's the
It's
same.
their future and everything that they've grown up thinking. But, you know, I'm not moaning about it, because there's always a good thing about it. But we do need, I think, to make sure we're not the ones who are in the loony bin, we
Yeah.
need some. And I know you could say there's lots of things happening behind the scenes, but we still need some sort of public show of, we've got this, guys, in
Yeah.
my opinion. And
Yeah.
then get this renewed insurance. But I think you hit the nail on the head really well, Brice, by saying, well, you know, we're still worried about all their opinions. What about all us? You know, you've got these people that are really standing up and putting virtually everything on the line. I've got so many people that contact me that have had to leave their jobs,
Yeah.
have had to leave, you know, family situation, things, you know, people really are up against it. I've got it easy compared to them. And you're just thinking, my God, you've got to, because if you don't reward, if you keep rewarding the wrong behavior, where is that going to get you? And we say lack of collateral damage. Well, if what we think is true about some of the implications of this, and I don't want to wait, I don't want to go to another moving forward. To me, it's not moving forward evolutionary at a soul level if we're just waiting for the med beds to save us all.
Right.
Now,
Exactly.
of course,
Yeah.
I think that we need them, because you've got to get, like, there's a really good use. Sometimes you need pharmaceutical medicine, because whilst you make the lifestyle changes that stop the problem coming back. So I see med beds as a brilliant stage in time to get people and animals back on track whilst they change the behaviors to stop it coming back. And I think that's brilliant.
Right.
Not as a crutch to say I take no responsibility for myself at all because I can step back in here and someone else will sort it for me.
Yeah. Do you know who Tamara is? I have her on my, yeah. She said, because she's kind of a channeler. She's kind of, and her and Janine have done some together on JC's channel. And she said that she believes that there's going to be an antidote for, however, what I've also heard, and this is interesting, is that this antidote will be freely given to people who, without their choice, without their consent, children, mentally impaired people that didn't have the capacity to make that decision. But the people who made the choice to go, in order to get that antidote, they're going to have to actually do the new system is going to force them to do inner work before they're able to take whatever it is, if that makes sense, to figure out what put them in the place where they caved to that, helping them. And it's not just going to be like candy, passing it out, like a Halloween passing out candy. They're going to actually make them sit down and heal themselves internally to figure out what put them in that position to be able to bow down and not have that critical thought, that just, oh, I'm just going to do this because I was told to do this, and I thought, well, that's pretty brilliant. If they can figure out a way to do that, then, because that's what is it? Simon Park said, and I kind of agree with him on this, where he said, when everything is revealed and your friends that were mean to you, our family comes up to you and says, how did you know? That's not, you should say, that's not the question you should ask. The question you should ask is, how did you not know?
Not know. Exactly. And it is funny. I mean, I can distinctly remember one of my really good friends who's really, really very, very spiritual. And about 10 years ago, she said to me, we were at a barbecue with all the kids running around and everything. And she just said to me, because everyone had almost been like, oh God, it's Catherine again, sort of attitude when I say things. And then she just looked at me and she said, oh my God, I've just realized, she said, you genuinely believe that animals should have the same rights as humans, don't you? And I was like, well, yes. And but it was just this awakening. She couldn't believe that, and she wasn't being nasty at all, by the way. She just had this awakening moment where she just thought she couldn't believe that someone could genuinely think that. Now, again, I have got no problem personally. I know everyone's background's different. I've got no problems that if you're living in the middle of the jungle and you need to eat an animal, that animals eat animals. I haven't got a problem with that. It's the way you do it. And the intent behind it, and waste, and the cruelty, unnecessary cruelty. But it was quite interesting. I think there's this aha well, and I think that is the perfect question: is how did you not know? Because I'm not. Well, my family, I mean, it's hysterical. The fact that I'm talking about politics is the biggest joke to myself, I don't think, because honestly, I'm clueless. I don't know anything about their financial systems. There's so much I don't know about. The things I'm passionate about, I constantly study up. There's huge areas of the world, that I cannot make any intelligent conversation about because I just don't know.
Yeah.
But I'm very happy to hear other people's opinions because I love learning. But how do people like us, how did we know? And this is what I'm really fascinated in exploring, because I think to move forward we have to understand that. Otherwise, how are we going to help all of us transition, all of us, because we've got bits that we still need to be awakened to. If we don't understand where that block is, how's it going to shift?
Yeah, and exactly, we all have blind spots. Like I know that as and I think in yoga, I always say when I do these courses that I run, still, it's the only real teaching I do now. I tell the beginner students, because they always get very nervous about coming into the big Mysore room and all that kind of stuff. And I'm like, listen, the easiest students to teach are the beginner students and the advanced students, because both the beginner and the advanced students know that they know nothing.
Yeah.
It's the intermediate students that think they know everything, and therefore they become difficult to teach. And I think that for a lot of us on this side of we've gone through this like process of knowing something wasn't right, doing the work, figuring out, standing up for what we feel is right. I think at least you and I and others and Janine and other people at that level where we know we have blind spots. Exactly. We know that there is still stuff that we're going to be shocked about. And, but then the other side of the completely deranged opposite, they think they know everything.
Yeah, this is what's so funny. And the amount of people that come, oh, it's hysterical, Brice. I know we've got to go in a minute, but the amount of people that shut down a conversation with me who just say, well, you just think you know everything. And I'm like, that is such project, because it couldn't be further the truth.
They were projecting.
Yes. No, that I know nothing. But the thing is, I've got that childlike enthusiasm. What I'm so desperate to know, like you and I were saying, I want to know who's living under the earth. I want to know what shape the earth is. I want to know all these things. I want to be able to really telepathically communicate with anyone, anytime, whenever I want. Now, I know it's completely possible, but I haven't put the effort into doing it.
I mean, think about travel. Think about how we know, exactly. I don't know how they do it, but we know this certain group of people travel very differently than we do. And I'm not talking about private planes in first class. I'm talking they can get to Australia in like an hour.
Exactly.
I mean, think about that. Like when we figure that out, I could go have lunch with Catherine in London, then hop over for dinner in Sydney with Tamara in Australia, exactly. And then back in Atlanta by nightfall.
I think it's the excitement, the possibilities of living these different lives, of learning from our mistakes. Keep learning. We're going to keep making mistakes. Of course we are. That's part of life. But we're going to keep learning from them and improve, learn, improve, learn, improve. Absolutely. Keep that feedback loop. And that means we're going to be okay. But please just tell us something.
I know, please just give us one. I'm
having one of those weeks, guys.
I know we're all laughing because the Las Vegas thing. They're like, oh yeah, that was our little like back we're doing. I'm like, no, I need something to hit like the mainstream that's gonna make us go, oh, just one arrest. Just give us one arrest.
Just one.
Just one arrest. And then we're gonna be like, okay, it's okay.
Easy to please, aren't we? But we are easy to please. But we were laughing because I just want to be honest with people, and I am feeling that. I'm just like, just one confirmation that we're on the right track, and then my energy levels, straight back up, get on my green juice, and I'm off and away. But
yeah. Please, if you're listening to us, Alliance, please just one. It doesn't have to even be a big player, just one that we know is dangerous, so we can go, okay. Yeah. So well, I know. Thank you it's been over an hour. This is a great conversation, Catherine. You guys, please go. Catherine is awesome. She has so many guests on her shows, people that you love as well, like Janine and JC, all these incredible people that are all globally all over the world working together to try to figure out what's going on top of it, to vent sometimes, because we know that you guys are also stressed out, and to also celebrate in the awesome information that is coming out. And we are also going to be doing another episode very soon that I'm super excited about in the next couple of days too. So you guys, please go make sure you subscribe to Catherine and check out again all of her videos. She does amazing work with animals, and you guys know I'm an animal lover. My little boy's laying stretched out right here. So please go and check her out, guys. And with that being said, I will talk to you soon. Bye, guys.
Thank you.